For 40 years, Dean Martin pulled off one of the greatest performances in entertainment history. Not in a movie, not in a song, but in real life. He staggered onto stages, slurred his words, leaned on pianos, and clutched a glass of whiskey like it was the only thing keeping him upright. America laughed. Critics mocked. Fans adored him as the lovable lush, the king of drunks who somehow still managed to sing like silk. He built an entire empire on the image of a man who couldn't possibly be taking anything seriously. And then, one night backstage, when he saw tears in his daughter's eyes, he quietly handed her that famous glass and whispered 2 words that shattered the illusion forever. Taste it. What she tasted wasn't scotch. It wasn't bourbon. It was apple juice. And in that moment, the greatest trick Dean Martin ever pulled was revealed. To understand how brilliant this was, you have to understand that Dean didn't play a drunk the way other entertainers did. Plenty of men had done drunken comedy before him. Foster Brooks turned fake intoxication into a full career. Dudley Moore won awards playing a charming alcoholic. But with them, the audience always knew it was an act. You could feel the separation between the performer and the role. With Dean Martin, that separation vanished. He didn't perform drunkenness. He lived inside a persona so completely that the myth swallowed the man. America didn't think Dean Martin was pretending to be drunk. America thought Dean Martin was drunk. Every week, the ritual was the same. Thursday night, 10 o'clock. Television flickers on. The announcer declares, direct from the bar, Dean Martin. The doors slide open, and there he is, not walking so much as drifting into the room. He slides down a fireman's pole instead of using the stairs, because, apparently, stairs are too much effort. His tuxedo is rumpled, his body undone, a cigarette hanging lazily from his mouth. In his hand is that glass, always that glass. Heavy crystal, icy, clinking, amber, liquid glowing under the lights. He sways. He squints at cue cards. Like the letters won't hold steel, he forgets lyricness. He giggles in the middle of serious songs. He leans on guests as if gravity itself has turned against him. The audience howls. It feels spontaneous. It feels dangerous. It feels real, and the world believed it. Reviewers wrote that he was barely able to stand. Fans mailed him bottles of scotch as gifts. Industry gossip painted him as Hollywood's most functional disaster. If you asked someone in 1968 who drank more, Dean Martin or Frank Sinatra, most people would say Dean without hesitation. The irony is almost cruel. Frank actually drank hard. Dean barely drank at all. He was often the most sober man in the room. The truth is, Dean Martin was running along calm, and he was running it with surgical precision. The glass was the key. Apple juice, sometimes watered down iced tea, sometimes just soda. Enough color to look convincing, enough ice to sound right. He controlled every detail because the illusion mattered. He protected it fiercely. Crew members who knew the secret were sworn to silence. Newcomers were shocked when they discovered the truth, and Dean never corrected the lie. He let it grow. He let it protect him, because that's what the drunk act really was. Protection. Dean Martin understood human psychology better than most executives, critics, or performers ever did. He knew perfection creates distance. Frank Sinatra was perfection. When Frank walked on stage, the room snapped to attention. He demanded respect. He demanded silence. He demanded excellence. You admired Frank, but you were also a little afraid of him. He was untouchable. God. Dean didn't want to be a god. He wanted to be liked. He wanted to feel safe. By pretending to be sloppy, he became unthreatening. By pretending not to care, he disarmed critics. If a note went flat, it was the booze. If a joke bombed, it was the booze. If he forgot a lyric, it was the booze. The act gave him cover. It allowed him to be brilliant without being intimidating, vulnerable without being weak, human without being exposed. And there was something even deeper. Dean Martin was a deeply private man. He didn't want the world inside his head. He didn't want scrutiny. He didn't want expectations. The drunk persona created a buffer between himself and the audience. They laughed at Dino, the lovable mess. Meanwhile, Dean Martin stayed hidden behind a smile, completely in control. Sober, sharp, observant, always watching. The greatest irony is that the man who spent his career pretending to be out of control was one of the most disciplined performers in show business. He hit his marks. He showed up on time. He knew his music cold. He protected his voice. He ran his sets with precision. The slurring, the stumbling, the looseness, it was choreography. Comedy, timing at the highest level, jazz-level improvisation wrapped in deception. That night backstage, when his daughter tasted the truth, it wasn't just apple juice she discovered. It was the revelation that her father had outsmarted the entire world for decades. He wasn't weak. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't drowning in alcohol. He was playing chess while everyone else thought he was barely conscious. Dean Martin didn't pretend to be drunk because he loved alcohol. He pretended to be drunk because he understood people. He understood fear. He understood charm. He understood that the fastest way into someone's heart isn't brilliance, it's approachability. He made himself smaller so others could feel bigger. He made himself sloppy so others could relax, and in doing so, he became immortal. The world remembers the glass, the slur, the stumble, but the truth is far more impressive. Dean Martin wasn't the king of drums. He was the king of control. And the greatest trick he ever pulled wasn't fooling audiences into laughing. It was fooling them into thinking they knew him. By pretending to be drunk, Dean lowered the stakes of perfection. If he missed a note, well, he was drunk. If he forgot a joke, he'd had one too many. The act gave him permission to be loose, reckless, unpredictable, and that unpredictability was electric. You can't judge a drunk man. You can only laugh with him. And Dean understood that instinctively. He engineered the illusion with the precision of a master magician. The amber liquid in his glass was almost always apple juice or watered-down tea. The ice cubes were often acrylic, so they wouldn't melt under hot studio lights and ruin the color. The cigarette was frequently unlit, just a prop. The slurring wasn't chemical at all. It was pure craft. Dean Martin had immaculate diction. He could phrase a lyric cleaner than almost anyone alive, but he chose to clip words, to mumble, to trip over syllables because it fits the character. He would intentionally tangle himself in microphone cords, read the wrong cue card on purpose, knock over an ashtray and stare at it like gravity had betrayed him. It was a high-wire act with no net. Push it too far and it becomes tragic. Don't push it far enough and it isn't funny. Dean walked that razor edge flawlessly for 3 decades. But there was a cost to the deception, and it wasn't paid by the audience. It was paid at home. While the world laughed, there was a small group of people who watched with confusion and quiet pain. His children. Deanna Martin adored her father. To her, he wasn't the king of cool or the king of drunks. He was just Dad. And the man she knew at home looked nothing like the man America thought it knew. The real Dean Martin woke up early, often before sunrise. He drank his coffee, read the paper, and went to the golf course. He was disciplined, methodical, focused. You don't play scratch golf hungover. You don't shoot a clean 72 if your hands are shaking. At home, he was calm and routine-driven. He watched westerns. He ate dinner with his family. Yes, he liked AJ&B and soda before supper, but he was rarely drunk. He valued sleep. He valued privacy. He valued control. Diana grew up living in two completely different realities. Inside the gates of their Beverly Hills home was one world. Outside was another. And when she started school, those worlds collided violently. Kids can be cruel, especially when they're echoing what they hear at home. On the playground, the whispers turned into taunts. "Your dad was wasted on TV last night," my mom says. "Your dad's an alcoholic. Is he drunk right now? Can he even walk straight?" It kuchi di. Imagine being a young girl who loves her father, who sees him as steady and kind, while the rest of the world insists he's a sloppy joke. Diana went home and watched him more closely. She studied him. Is he drunk? She wondered, but he seemed fine. He was making a sandwich, reading a script, talking about golf. Then she'd turn on the television and see him stumbling, slurring, clutching that glass. The contradiction began to mess with her head. Maybe I'm wrong, she thought. Maybe the TV version is the real one, and the one at home is just an act. The shame grew quietly. She stopped talking about her father at school. She stopped inviting friends over. The con was working too well. It was fooling everyone, including the people Dean loved most. It all came to a breaking point one evening, when Diana was a teenager and visited the set of the Dean Martin show. The studio was alive, the orchestra warming up, the gold diggers rehearsing, the audience filing in, buzzing with anticipation to watch the lovable drunk unravel on cue. Diana slipped backstage to her father's dressing room, a quiet sanctuary of leather couches, dim lights, cologne, and tobacco. Dean sat in the chair as makeup was applied, sharp-eyed, composed, completely present. He looked perfect, in control. Nothing like the man America was about to see. Diana was holding everything in, the whispers, the embarrassment, the doubt, the confusion. Then her eyes drifted to the prop table. There it was. The glass, the heavy crystal tumbler, the amber liquid, the easy, waiting for him, waiting to turn her father into a caricature again. Something in her broke. She picked it up, walked over to him, and her voice shook. "Dad," she said, tears welling up. "Are you really drunk? Are you sick? Why do they say these things about you?" The room went still. Dean looked at his daughter's face, red and trembling, and in that instant the joke stopped being funny. Without a word, he took the glass from her hands and gently placed it back in hers. He leaned in and whispered, "Taste it." Diana hesitated, then took a sip. It was sweet, cool, innocent, apple juice. She looked up at him, stunned. Dean smiled softly, a sad, knowing smile, and said, "It's just an act, baby. Always was." In that moment, the illusion shattered. The king of drunks vanished, replaced by a father who realized his greatest performance had wounded the people he was trying to protect. Dean Martin wasn't fooling the world because he was careless. He was fooling it because he was brilliant. But even brilliance has consequences. And that night, for the first time, Dean Martin understood that the only audience that truly mattered was standing right in front of him. It was a prop he had been using for years, and in that moment it became a weapon turned inward, humiliating him in the eyes of the one person whose opinion actually mattered. Diana couldn't hold it in any more. Tears welled up and spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Dad!" Dean turned instantly. He saw her face. Not the adoring smile she usually wore, but confusion, hurt, and embarrassment tangled together. Dean Martin was a man of few words, but his intuition was razor sharp. He waved the makeup artist away without a second thought and leaned toward her. "What's wrong, baby?" he asked quietly. Sober, fully present. "Why do you do it?" Diana cried. "Why do you act like that? Kids at school say you're a drunk. They say you're an alcoholic. It's embarrassing, Dad. I know you're not like that, but why does the whole world have to think you're?" The room fell dead silent. Dean didn't interrupt her. He didn't defend himself. He just listened. And in that stillness, something shifted inside him. For the first time, he truly understood that his joke had a casualty. His greatest performance, the one that had made him untouchable, was hurting the one person he would have given everything to protect. He stood up slowly and walked over to the prop table. Sitting there was the glass. The famous glass. The crystal tumbler photographed 1,000,000 times, etched into pop culture. The symbol of Dino, the drunk. Ice clinked softly as he lifted it. He turned back to Deanna and held it out to her. "Deanna," he said, looking straight into her eyes. "Taste it." She froze. Confused, afraid. Was he really offering her alcohol? She hesitated, but his voice was calm, steady, reassuring. "Taste it," he repeated gently. She leaned forward and took a small sip, bracing herself for the burn she expected. But there was no burn, no bite, just something cold, sweet, and familiar. Her eyes widened. "It's apple juice," she whispered. Dean smiled, a real smile, warm and unguarded. "Apple juice," he said. "Sometimes tea, but never booze. Not when I'm working." She stared at the glass, then back at him, trying to reconcile what she'd just learned. "But you act so drunk," she said. "You stumbled. You slept." Dean took the glass back and sipped it himself. "That's the act, honey. That's the show. I'm an entertainer. When I'm out there, I'm playing a part. Same way John Wayne plays a cowboy. Same way your Uncle Frank plays the tough guy." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "If I really drank like that, I couldn't do my job. I couldn't remember the songs. I couldn't hit my marks. I couldn't be sharp. And I have to be sharp, because I have to take care of you and this family." He gestured toward the stage door where the muffled roar of the audience could already be heard. "Out there, they want Dino the drunk." It makes them laugh. It makes them feel better about themselves. So I give it to them. But in here, with you, I'm just Dad. And Dad is sober. In that instant, the weight lifted from Deanna's chest. The shame dissolved. Her father wasn't broken. He wasn't weak. He wasn't a joke. He was brilliant. Brilliant enough to fool an entire nation for decades. She suddenly saw it all clearly. The stumbling was choreography. The slurring was controlled diction. The forgotten lyrics were planned. The chaos was discipline disguised as ease. She laughed, really laughed, shaking her head. "Apple juice," she said. "You tricked everyone." Dean winked. "We tricked everyone. And this is our secret. Don't tell the papers, or I'll be out of work." He kissed her on the forehead, straightened his tie by loosening it to look sloppy, picked up his glass of juice, and walked toward the stage. As the announcer boomed, Dean Martin, Deanna watched him pause, take a breath, drop his shoulders, glaze his eyes, and transform. He stumbled through the curtain, spilling a little of the scotch as the crowd erupted. This time, she wasn't embarrassed. She was proud. She wasn't watching a drunk. She was watching a master. Dean Martin carried that secret to his grave. His closest friends knew the truth and played along. Frank Sinatra used to joke, "I spilled more than Dean drinks." And it was true. That quiet moment backstage revealed everything about who Dean Martin really was. A A professional who respected his audience too much to actually lose control. A craftsman who understood that comedy only works when it's precise. A father who didn't care what critics thought, but couldn't stand the idea of his daughter thinking he was weak. When the story finally surfaced years later, it rewrote his legacy. Dean Martin wasn't a lucky drunk who coasted on charm. He was one of the most disciplined, intelligent performers of his era. He created a fantasy and lived inside it so convincingly that even history believed it. He let the world laugh at his failings so it could feel human. But behind the glass was a man drinking apple juice, sharp enough to catch you when you fell. So the next time you see Dean Martin staggering across a stage, don't feel sorry for him. Smile. You're watching the greatest illusionist show business ever produced. He wasn't drunk on alcohol. He was drunk on control, timing, and genius. And the joke, all along, was on us.